Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Azeroth Daily for the 24th of May 2011. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of WoW news and comment. Before I go on, I've got to say that this will be the last episode in this current season of Azeroth Daily. The show will be taking a hiatus. The reason for that is the fact that Blizzard has decided to make decisions that I personally do not agree with, to the point where I don't believe that this game is aimed at me anymore, and as a responsible consumer, I am exercising my right not to play it. As such, I will also not be producing the Azeroth Daily content. I'll explain why, because we're going into that piece of news at the moment, but before I go on, I would like to say to everyone who has been watching the show and supporting it over the last 85 or so episodes, thank you very much for your support, and I hope that some of you will stick around to watch the other content that's coming for you here on. If you do decide to unsubscribe, I totally understand that. Thanks very much for your support, and I hope that you've had a good time here. In the headlines today, raid updates for 4.2. This is the main reason why I've made the decision to stop the show. Now, what's going to be happening is that when 4.2 is released, all of the 10 and 25-man normal modes for the first tier of content will be getting a nerf, or as Nethera describes it, a comprehensive set of tuning adjustments to decrease their difficulty. The justification for this is that this change will allow players, groups, and guilds who have yet to experience the content in Blackwing Descent, Bastion of Twilight, and Throne of the Four Winds an opportunity to do so. Bear in mind that Valor Gear, at least the current Valor Gear, item level 359, will also then be available for Justice points, so you can gear up in raid level gear from 5-mans. Now, the list of nerfs is extremely comprehensive. There are an awful lot of them, to say the least. Every encounter has been nerfed pretty damn hard. Now, to me, this is the straw that breaks the camel's back, and it's not about how it affects me, because it really doesn't. Now, I did all of this content in the beta when it was much harder than it is now. I had my fun with it, and to be honest, I'm not really so bothered about it anymore. The heroic modes don't really attract my interest all that much, and as we can see by the statistics over on wildprogress.com, they don't seem to actually interest a lot of people. You would have thought that people would work a lot harder to get to the heroic modes, and yet you see this massive drop-off in terms of the amount of people that actually beat various pieces of content. A prime example, if we go over to wowprogress.com right now, we can see that Cho'Gall has been killed by 50% of current raiding guilds, based on the statistics they've gathered, so that's 29,430 guilds. However, then Harvest Wormbreaker has only been killed by 28%, and then Valion and Theralion killed by a mere 7%. Now, to me, both of those seem like absolutely massive drops, and it is difficult to say as to whether or not there are people that simply can't do it and the difficulty has just gone up in leaps and bounds, or whether or not it's simply because people don't care. Another example would be Conclave of Wind, for instance, and Alakia. Alakia killed by 21,915 guilds. Heroic Conclave of Wind killed by 2,800 guilds. That's a very, very large drop. If I were to speculate on that, I would say that the reason that that drop is so large is simply because people don't want to do the same content over and over again with minor bells and whistles added to it, regardless of how challenging it actually is. So it's really disappointing for them to nerf the content down like that. It doesn't even make any sense. I mean, they were already going to be giving people item level 359, so they would be able to get the gear they needed, in fact, to overgear the normal modes anyway. So adding a nerf in once again is just fairly disgraceful, and it also demonstrates to me that they are going back to the single dungeon per tier attitude, which is quite obvious. I mean, just look at what they're doing. They're releasing Firelands, which is a 7-boss raid encounter, as an entire tier of raiding. They can't add another dungeon in there, because, of course, by that point, people will have already got that level of gear, and they're looking to go on to the next one. So they're going to have to add another tier and things like that. And then they go and obsolete this content. I think it's the nature of who I actually am and the way that I've experienced the game up to this point. I've been playing this game since the very start. And I started on day one, EU launch, and I've played all the way through. So I've been playing for 6 years. And to me, the best time was actually in TBC. I am not one of those people that believe that Vanilla had the best rating. It certainly had some good rating. Little bits of Blackwing Lair were really good. And then there were parts of Anchorage that were really good, but there were also a lot of really bad encounters back in Vanilla, and let's not even pretend that they were somehow more advanced than the things that we have now. It's just simply not the case. But TBC, to me, was fantastic. It had the Cataclysm-style attitude of multiple dungeons per tier, or at least it had, And as a result, you had a situation where you didn't just have the current tier of content being all that was relevant. People would actually do the previous tiers, and yes, they would actually progress through that. And it was okay to be behind. And you didn't have to be afraid of the content being nerfed into the ground and no longer being enjoyable anymore in terms of actually getting a real challenge. So I think that Blizzard has gone the wrong way. They've seen this drop in subscribers, and they turned around and said, well, it's because we need to get more content out faster. So what do? Well, they nerf a bunch of content so that people can clear it even quicker, and they also make the assumption that people are leaving the game because it's too hard. That doesn't make any sense. Why would they be doing that? They're not going to leave the game for, say, Rift, which is probably the biggest MMO in terms of players transferring from one game to another at the minute. That's the obvious one that people are going to, and as it turns out, Rift didn't fall flat on its face, which makes it fairly unique, since Aeon and Warhammer Online and games like that absolutely did. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't agree with the way that Blizzard is going now, and as a result, I don't want to play the game anymore, and I don't want to cover the game anymore. It's really sad, honestly, because I've been covering it for so long, but it's not the game for me. Not anymore. I'm not their target audience anymore, and I understand that, but it's unfortunate they decided to shift said target audience and change their development attitudes to ones that I believe are detrimental to the actual quality of the game. Now, you might say, well, it's unreasonable to do this because it's not a change that directly affects you. Well, for one thing, changes that don't directly affect me can still be objectively bad. And I think that's the difference between concerning yourself with the overall direction the game is going and whether or not your class got nerfed this patch. Now, I personally, if I see something going wrong with another class that's blatantly unfair, then I will call Blizzard on that. And I don't mean literally call them. As much as people would like to think I have a red phone that I can dial, can't be a very effective phone. Whatever the case, it comes down to the fact that they are making this content easier when it didn't need to be easier. And people are like, oh, it's too hard. Yeah, but here's the thing. Blizzard has a lot of damage to repair. They have socially engineered the player base to be worse than they were previously. Why? Because they keep making too many concessions to them. Oh, I'm a bad player. I can't get through this content. Blizzard, can you please do something about that? Blizzard turns around and says, okay. And they don't think about this large proportion of the player base. They don't actually post on the forums. They just get along with things. I mean, for God's sake, as I was giving you numbers before, massive, massive numbers of raid guilds. I mean, just have a look at this. You know, Magmore's been killed by 55,000 raid guilds. It's a lot of raid guilds. I mean, even if there were only 10 men per guild, that would still account for 500,000. And we know for a fact that there are way more than that. So there's a very significant chunk of the player base actually raiding. And nerfing this content down does affect a load of people. Now you might say, well, this stuff doesn't matter because we're moving forward to Firelands. Are you seriously telling me that 7 bosses is enough content for this tier, that we should obsolete everything else? I don't think so. That's a terrible idea. It's also yet another step in decreasing the general player skill and quality of the player base. It opens up the floodgates for yet more entitled behavior. People now know that Blizzard will happily simply give in. Bearing in mind, these are the guys that just a few months ago were posting big, grandiose blogs saying dungeons are hard and then proceeded to nerf them into the ground. Raiding is hard, then proceeded to nerf it into the ground. To me, it represents that Blizzard can't actually stick to their guns anymore. They're incapable, which is really unfortunate since Cataclysm was hopefully showing a different side of Blizzard, going back to the whole TBC attitude of, hey, you know what? If people can't do it, tough. There's other things they can do, and they have to rise to the challenge. Now, what does that tell people? No, you don't have to rise to the challenge, you just have to wait long enough, and the challenge will simply disappear. Not happy with that, not one little bit. It is a horrible attitude to have. Yeah, of course, it doesn't affect me personally. Why would it? It doesn't matter if it doesn't affect me personally. I'm not that selfish a person. I want to see the game be good, and I want to see the player base raise in terms of its quality, and it doesn't. And it's Blizzard's fault. It's as simple as that. So, as I said, Azeroth Daily is going on hiatus. It may return if the game does get better, and if there's a change in attitude, then absolutely, I'll happily come back to the game. Nothing wrong with that. But for the moment, I'm going to be unsubscribing, and I'm going to be focusing on other games, as well as the possibility of other MMOs. As to which one, I haven't really decided yet. So there you go. That was probably the longest news segment ever. Oh yeah, and they're removing keyrings. Yes, I kid you not, they are removing keyrings, as Bashiok has pointed out that there's really no need for keys in the way that they used to be anymore, so the keyring was actually taking up physical storage space on the servers, as well as visual interface space for you. Yeah, about 5 pixels. Have you seen the size of that button? So yeah, they're getting rid of it in order to free up space for new features. And personally, I don't really have a huge problem with that. It does seem that keys, once again, have become obsolete. And I do not miss the days of trying to find the guy that had the key for Ubers in a 15-man group where nobody actually did. Now, there's little point in doing the Daily Blues, since this is exactly what we've been talking about right here. All of these were actually blue posts, and are, of course, extremely important in terms of the discussion that's going on at the moment. There aren't really any responses from the blues on this issue right now, which is disappointing, honestly. I would like to see them actually justify this opinion beyond the couple of lines that they have already given. And with that, it's time for your daily grind. Just to continue what was going on with the Fellsworn gas mask quest, after you've finished putting down the revolt, in air quotes, you are then asked to slay the leader of the camp, going by the name of Doomcrier. In order to do so, you have to gain some camp anger keys in order to activate the obelisks in order to summon this particular mob. And in this case, this mob is actually designed around 2 players. It was one of those old quests that actually encouraged you to work as a team. And it was difficult to solo. Admittedly, our cameraman here doesn't seem to be having any problems for obvious reasons, but a pretty damn cool quest nonetheless. And always nice to deceive the wonderful Burning Legion, who aren't, let's be honest, very smart. And with that, it's time for your weekly feature. This is the Achievement Hog. Well, since this is going to be the last achievement hog for a while, I think we'd better go out in a bang. I've got 2 achievements right here, one of which is a bit large. It's called From Hell's Heart I Stab at Thee. Yes, indeed, it requires you to kill the whale shark. In this case, I have one of my friends from Insidia who is showing you how to kill the whale shark with just 4 people. In this case, it is an example of some of the most ridiculous hunter kiting I have ever seen. Oh yes, pretty much the standard strat for killing the whale shark is to ensure that you have someone who is capable of kiting at a rapid enough speed and holding aggro, and making sure that other people do not in fact pull the aggro. In this case, you can see the hitbox of the whale shark is large enough so that you can actually strafe sideways and still hit it. So all the way through there, no problems whatsoever. Just keep ahead of the whale shark, make sure he doesn't bite you. If he does, you are pretty much dead instantly, as I recall. I'm trying to think how much it used to hit me in the beta for. I'm pretty sure it was a couple of million. So yeah, you don't want to be hit by that whatsoever. There's no other strategy to it really, just keep strafing the strafing and make sure you don't pull aggro, and the whale shark will eventually die after a fairly significant amount of time, and will give you that achievement. Also, do make sure you don't disconnect in the middle of it, because the whale shark has no time for your flippantry. And last but by no means least, one of the ultimate achievements in this particular game. There is no strategy to this other than you have to do everything. I'm just showing you for the sake of showing you. It's called What a Long, Strange Trip It Has Been, which seems fairly appropriate considering this will be the last As Daily for a while. And in this case, it involves getting all of the achievements from all of the annual events. And in this case right here, you can see our cameraman manages to do just that, finishing off with Children's Week. No problem whatsoever, and there you go. That is your long, strange trip, and this is your Violet Proto-Drake. And today I learned Alex Strauss the Lifebinder likes to use the mailing system. And with that, it's time for the mailbox. Now, before I go on, I would like to say the mailbox is not going anywhere. It will continue as a separate daily feature. It does seem to me that people do enjoy having the mailbox and the ability to interact as part of the community. The mailbox will continue for World of Warcraft as well as pretty much any other gaming subject you happen to want, and we'll be looking towards doing about 15 minutes of this every single day. So there you go, we'll see what people make of that, and hopefully people will continue to interact via the mailbox. Okay, first email does come in from the one and the only Glim from the Fenris server that says this. Before we get going, I'd like to thank you for all the great YouTube content. I'm in a small level 10 guild with around 8 people who play fairly regularly and others who come in and out on a more infrequent basis. For the past month or so, I've been trying to organize a 10-man raiding team, but the task has proved to be pretty much impossible. We don't have 10 people willing to commit to the time to gear up. Their game interests lie elsewhere, and recruiting is difficult at best, especially since we simply don't have the perks and the numbers that the larger guilds can offer. I really really like the people in my guild, and since the social aspect is such a huge part of what WoW is, I don't want to jump ship and move to a larger guild. After looking at the other guilds on my server, it's clear that there are others in the same situation. While discussing the problem of pugging a raid, a guildmate and I had the idea to reach out to similar guilds and try some cooperative raiding. We would each contribute a 5-person team, and together we would get the opportunity to experience the endgame content. We've yet to hear back from anyone, so I don't know how this idea will be received. Given that this is a most common dilemma, do you think that Blizzard has any plans to implement a system that might make this kind of process easier via an in-game tool like the Looking for Guild feature? Small guilds could reach out to one another and band together to complete tasks that they might not otherwise be able to do individually. Official support for such cooperative endeavors might also give credit for guild achievements, something we won't get now, or split guild experience gains for the weekly raid challenges. This also seems like a good way for Blizzard to further promote a feeling of community across servers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this particular matter. Yeah, this is basically taking the old idea of raiding alliances and putting it into an actual in-game interface, which I thoroughly support. Raiding alliances used to happen back in the old content a lot because it required 40 people, and obviously gathering 40 people with a guild as opposed to 10 is significantly harder. So what people used to do is the smaller guilds would band together into an alliance, and they would each contribute members to a team. I absolutely think this should be part of the interface. I don't see why not. There are plenty of other games that have the concept of alliance. I mean, EVE, prime example. You've got corporations in EVE that are pretty much guilds, but then you've got wider alliances, which are also linked together in terms of the way that the game interface works. Now, EVE is a significantly more complicated game, but I don't see any reason not to implement this kind of thing in. And this is one of the things that Blizzard could do to encourage people to raid, not by nerfing the content, but by actually making the problems of raiding go away through giving additional tools to the community in order to solve them themselves. That's what I would like to see. It's such a shame they haven't decided to do that, but yeah, that should be in the game, and I would recommend this approach to anyone that's having trouble getting a full raiding team from their guild, by the way. Guild alliances do work. We used to do them back in the day. You can still do them right now. This one comes in from Felix that says, "Hey TB, I love your work, and I've got an idea for a casual difficulty level of raiding. Let's say your guild doesn't raid enough to see all of the content and the bosses, and instead of normal, you have a casual mode. So when you enter in on casual, you're met by some kind of lore person that says something like, 'Method has defeated Magmore, but it was just temporary. You must now finish him off for good.' Now, I don't know who got world first Magmore, but the idea is that the guild that got the world first on that boss or raid dungeon will be the heroes that have weakened that boss, and the boss won't have as many abilities or as much health as on normal. It should be looked at as like a tourist mode. The only rewards would be blues and a decent amount of justice or valor points. I'd like to see your opinion on this idea." Well, I wouldn't give valor points for it, certainly. If you're going to give blues, but then give valor points that access 359 epics, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I think the method that you're actually explaining there is very contrived, and it would get very samey very quickly. I mean, what happened? Did every boss somehow survive the slaying by Method? Method can't be a very good guild then if they keep not killing the bosses. But the actual idea itself is pretty sound. This is the thing, right? If they actually had a normal mode of difficulty, but they also had an easy mode of difficulty and then a hard mode of difficulty, a lot of the problems I have with the game would disappear. This whole idea of, oh, well, this is for everyone to see the content is basically nonsense. The majority of the content is done in normal mode. In fact, every guild has to do it in normal mode in order to access heroic, and then even after that, you see this massive drop-off in people that are actually attempting the heroic modes. They either just don't care, or the difficulty jump is too large for people to actually pull off. And I think that comes down to a problem of scaling. And if you have this sudden difficulty spike that causes a lot of people to simply stop playing out of sheer frustration, then you've got issues. And it's not just that. I hear from people all the time, whether or not it be via emails, PMs, discussions in the game, or, of course, via reading articles by various guilds, that the heroic modes just aren't all that good. And they're often a mishmash of untuned nonsense. And there is RNG involved in it, and it's overall more frustrating than it is enjoyable. So to me, it doesn't seem like a lot of these heroic modes are all that well designed. Now, some of them obviously are, but there are plenty of others that aren't. Not only that, but it comes down to the idea that why is it that Blizzard thinks that nerfing the content down will cater to the majority of the player base? I don't believe that. I think the majority of the player base are actually somewhere in the middle. You've got the people that are really bad at the game, you've got the people that are really good at the game, and then you've got this massive group of people, perhaps totaling millions of players, that are stuck somewhere in the middle and are not being catered to in any way. You see, I would be okay if when you went into normal modes, they were tuned in the way that normal modes should be. And then there was a mode below that, which was casual, and I don't know, I mean, I don't like the idea of calling it casual, because I don't believe that casual players are bad. And for God's sake, I only raid once a week, and we don't have problems with these bosses. But it comes down to saying, look, this is the standard we expect from you. There is an easier mode if you want it. Just don't expect to get into the harder modes without actually putting some effort in. I mean, really, what's wrong with, say, making a casual mode, if you want to call it that, or I would just say an easy mode. Hey, just call it easy. What, is that offensive to people now? Tough. That's the kind of thing that people do need to learn. What's wrong with having that gave out either item level 353 or 349, just something a little bit higher? Don't give out epics, give out blues, give people raiding experience, and then once they're ready to go into this content, then they can go and do the normal modes. Now, they might not want to, and I wouldn't necessarily blame them. Do they want to repeat the content again? Probably not. Okay, cool, you've seen the content. Done. No problem. It's the same reason that I, generally speaking, with the exception of a few games, don't feel the need to play a game twice on multiple difficulty levels. I just don't. There are some exceptions, where it adds a significant element to the game. Most of the time, I'll play a game through on normal. It's very rare that I'll play it on easy, because usually I don't find it challenging enough, but normal's usually okay. Sometimes hard. Shooters, particularly, I like to play on hard. And then I probably won't play it again, but I'll be satisfied with the fact that I feel that I've gotten my money's worth, and I have seen what the game has to offer. It's as simple as that. A lot of the problems in the game right now could be solved by simply accepting the fact that people play at different levels of skill. And as long as you are giving people options in terms of what they can do, and they're finding something that's challenging to them, then it's cool. It's when you take content that's supposed to be catering to the majority of the player base and nerf it down for the lowest common denominator that it starts to get bad. It's as simple as that. Right, folks, that is me done for Azeroth Daily for the time being. Thank you very much for watching and supporting this show. There will be other pieces of content going forward. We will not be focusing on World of Warcraft for the time being. If WoW changes its mind, more to the point, if Blizzard changes its mind and decides, hey, this is a bad idea, we're going to add something like, say, another difficulty mode, or we're going to change our design philosophy, then great. I am not ruling out the point of coming back to WoW. You know, this is harder the first time I've quit due to similar issues like this. So we're putting the show on hiatus for the moment, and we'll see what ends up happening. As I said before, Mailbox will continue to be a feature, and I will do the postcards from Azeroth on Friday's Mailbox, just to make sure that you guys haven't submitted a wasted entry or anything like that. As regards to which MMOs I will be focusing on, well, I'm still trying to decide that. DDO is a likelihood, because I've played that game before, and I know that it's good, and it's actually kind of what I want right now. There's an example of a game that provides usually 4 difficulty levels for all of its content, and has a lot of challenging dungeon content, so I'm thinking maybe some DDO. People have been asking, well, are you interested in going to Rift? And I've said before, I don't really want another hotkey MMO right now, although I have to say that because of the attitudes of Treon Worlds, I do feel like I at least need to give the game another chance, because they really have been doing right by their customers lately. It's a possibility, I'm not promising anything, it really depends whether or not I can stomach the idea of hotkey game leveling again. It's honestly quite unlikely, but we'll see. Aside from that, Black Prophecy is a possibility, and we are no doubt all waiting for Tor, course, and Guild Wars 2, and we'll see what comes of those. Also been having a look at Terra Online. There's a possibility. So yeah, lots of things coming forward. Everything else will continue as normal, and thank you once again for supporting the show. If you do decide to unsubscribe after this episode is done, I do not hold it against you, and I don't blame you. Once again, exercise your right as a consumer to not watch the stuff that you don't want to watch. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in future content.